The stars looked cold and empty as Princess Zara gripped the controls of her escape pod with trembling hands. Behind her, the beautiful blue world of Cytheria was nothing but ash and fire. The Vorthan ships had come like a plague, their black hulls blocking out the sun as they rained death from above. Her father, the king, was dead. Her mother, the queen, was dead. The royal palace, where she had spent her childhood learning poetry and star music, was now a smoking crater. Zara had barely made it to the escape pod before the final bombardment began. The last thing she saw through the porthole was her home planet splitting apart like a broken egg. Millions of her people, the gentle Cytherians who had never known war, were gone in moments. She was alone now, perhaps the last of her kind, fleeing through the dark between worlds with nowhere to go. Her pod was small and fast, but not built for long journeys. The life support systems were already showing yellow warning lights. Worse, the navigation computer had been damaged in her escape. When she tried to plot a course to any safe world, the screen just flickered and went dark. She was lost in space. With no map and no hope, the hyperspace jump had taken her far from Vorthan territory, but it had also taken her far from any world she knew. According to the star charts, she was in a region called human space, but she had never heard of humans before. Were they friends or enemies? Were they even real or just legends? Right now, she had no choice but to hope they were real and that they were kind. The pod shuddered as something went wrong with the engines. Sparks flew from the control panel and the air started to smell like burning metal. Zara tried to fix the problem, but she was a princess, not an engineer. Her education had focused on art and diplomacy, not spaceship repair. She watched helplessly as system after system began to fail. Oxygen levels were dropping fast. The temperature was getting colder by the minute. Her breath came out in white puffs as she wrapped her arms around herself and shivered. The bioluminescent patterns on her skin, normally bright silver, were fading to a dull gray. This was how she would die, alone and forgotten in the endless dark. But then something appeared on her sensors. A ship moving toward her position. It was bigger than her pod, but still small compared to the massive Vorthan war vessels. The design was unfamiliar, with smooth curves and what looked like weapon ports along the hull. Zara felt a moment of terror. What if these were more enemies? What if they were Vorthan allies who would capture her and drag her back to face torture and death? She tried to change course, but her engines were too damaged. The unknown ship moved closer, its sensors sweeping over her pod like invisible fingers. Then a voice came over the communication system, speaking in a language she did not understand. The words sounded harsh and alien, but there was something in the tone that seemed concerned rather than threatening. Lieutenant. Commander Jake Morrison sat in the pilot's seat of his patrol ship, the EDF Ranger, studying the damaged vessel on his screen. He had been on routine patrol duty near the edge of human space when his sensors picked up the unknown craft. It was clearly in trouble, leaking atmosphere and power fluctuating wildly. Whatever was inside would be dead soon if he did not act fast. Jake had been with the Earth Defense Force for 8 years, ever since he turned 18 and signed up to see the galaxy. He had fought pirates and smugglers, rescued stranded miners, and explored dead worlds. But he had never encountered an alien ship before. First contact protocol said he should report to command and wait for orders, but that would take hours and whoever was in that pod would be dead by then. He made his decision quickly. Jake activated his ship's tractor beam and pulled the alien pod into his cargo bay. As soon as the bay was pressurized, he grabbed his sidearm and headed down to investigate. The pod was small and elegant, made of some kind of silver metal that seemed to shimmer in the light. Strange symbols were carved along its hull. Beautiful but completely unreadable. Jake found the hatch and managed to get it open with some effort. Inside, slumped over the controls, was the most incredible sight he had ever seen. It was clearly female and roughly human in shape, but her skin was pale blue like winter sky. Her hair was long and silver, falling around her face like liquid moonlight. Most amazing of all were the intricate patterns that covered her arms and neck, glowing faintly with their own inner light. She was unconscious but still breathing. Jake carefully lifted her out of the pod and carried her to his ship's medical bay. She was lighter than a human woman of the same size, and her skin felt cool to the touch. As he placed her on the examination table, Jake noticed that her clothing was made of some kind of fabric that changed color as it moved. Shifting from deep purple to midnight blue, the medical scanner showed that her biology was similar, enough to human that the basic life support systems would work. Her oxygen levels were dangerously low, and she was suffering from hypothermia, but she would live if he could get her warmed up and breathing properly. Jake worked quickly, attaching oxygen tubes and warming blankets, monitoring her vital signs. On the screen above the bed, as he worked, Jake found himself wondering who she was and where she had come from. Her pod looked expensive, maybe even royal. The craftsmanship was incredible, far beyond anything humans could build. But it was also damaged by what looked like weapon fire. Someone had been shooting at her. Someone had wanted her dead or captured. After an hour of treatment, her breathing improved and some color returned to her blue skin. The glowing patterns on her arms began to brighten, pulsing gently like a slow heartbeat. Jake pulled up a chair beside the bed and waited for her to wake up. He had so many questions, but first he needed to make sure she understood that she was safe. When Princess Zara finally opened her eyes, the first thing she saw was a strange face looking down at her with concern. The creature had pink skin and brown hair, with eyes the color of rich earth. He was clearly not Catherian, but he was not Vorthan either. This must be one of the mysterious humans she had heard whispered about in the royal court. She tried to sit up quickly, but immediately regretted it as dizziness washed over her. The human gently pressed her back down onto the soft surface where she lay. He spoke in his alien language, but his voice was calm and soothing. Even without understanding his words, Zara could tell he was trying to help her. Terror and gratitude warred in her heart as she looked around the small medical room. She was alive and safe for now, but she was also completely at the mercy of this strange alien warrior who had saved her life. Jake knew he was breaking every rule in the military handbook, but he could not bring himself to care. The alien woman was clearly terrified and alone, and his conscience would not let him hand her over to command without knowing more about her situation. He made the decision to take his ship to the Broken Ring, an asteroid field where smugglers and pirates liked to hide from patrol ships. If anyone came looking for them, the rocky debris would mask their energy signature. The journey took 6 hours, during which Jake tried to establish basic communication with his unexpected passenger. He had activated the ship's universal translator, a piece of technology that could learn new languages by analyzing speech patterns and context. The process was slow, but gradually the computer began to make sense of her musical words. Zara watched the human warrior with growing curiosity as he worked at his strange machines. His movements were precise and confident, like a soldier, but his eyes held a gentleness that reminded her of her father. When he brought her food and water, he was careful not to startle her. When she flinched away from his touch, he backed off immediately and gave her space. The first breakthrough came when Jake pointed to himself and said clearly, "Jake." Then he pointed to her with a questioning look. Zara understood and touched her chest. "Zara," she said in her own language. Jake smiled and repeated her name, though his pronunciation was clumsy. It was a start. Over the next few days, as they hid among the floating rocks, their communication improved dramatically. The universal translator learned her language patterns and began providing rough translations of their conversations. Zara learned that Jake was a lieutenant commander in something called the Earth Defense Force, and that humans came from a world called Earth in a distant part of the galaxy. Jake learned that Zara was princess of the Catherian Empire, a peaceful civilization that had been completely destroyed by an enemy called the Vorthan Collective. As she told him about her people's fate, tears ran down her blue cheeks and her bioluminescent markings flickered with sorrow. The Catherians had been artists and philosophers, she explained. They had never known war until the Vorthans came. With their black ships and their hunger for conquest, the story broke Jake's heart. He had seen plenty of violence in his military career, but the idea of an entire peaceful civilization being wiped out for no reason made him angry in a way he had never felt before. When Zara described how her parents had died protecting her escape, Jake found himself wanting to hunt down every Vorthan in the galaxy and make them pay. But Zara had more to tell him. And the rest of her story was even more dangerous, she explained. That she carried within her genetic code the location of Kairos Prime, a hidden world where the last survivors of her people had gathered. The bioluminescent patterns on her skin were not just decorative, they were actually a form of living data storage that contained star charts, historical records, and the most precious secrets of Catherian science. The Vorthans knew about this, which was why they were hunting her so desperately. Without the information locked in her genes, they could never find and destroy the last of her people. But if they captured her, they could extract the data and complete their genocide. Zara was literally the key to her species' survival or extinction. Jake listened to all of this with growing amazement. The idea of encoding information in living tissue was far beyond human science, but it explained why the enemy was so determined to capture one young woman. It also explained why she had been so afraid when she first woke up on his ship. For all she knew, he could have been working for her enemies. As they talked, Jake found himself fascinated by Catherian culture. Zara described a society where art and beauty were valued above wealth or power, where conflicts were resolved through debate and compromise rather than violence. She told him about the crystal cities of her homeworld, where buildings grew like living things and music filled the air day and night. She spoke of her people's philosophy that all life was connected, that harming one being diminished the entire universe. In return, Jake told her about Earth and human history. He explained how humans had fought countless wars among themselves, before finally uniting to explore the stars. He described Earth's blue oceans and green forests, its billions of people living in massive cities and small towns. Zara was amazed by the concept of individual heroism, which was foreign to her collective-minded species. The idea that one person could choose to sacrifice everything for a stranger was completely alien to her way of thinking. Their peaceful conversations were interrupted on the fourth day when Jake's sensors detected an incoming ship. It was sleek and black with weapon arrays that glowed with deadly energy. A Vorthan scout ship had found their hiding place. Jake immediately powered up his engines and weapon systems, but he knew his single patrol craft was no match for the enemy warship. The Vorthans had superior technology and firepower, plus they were not bound by human rules about avoiding civilian casualties. They would destroy his ship without hesitation if it meant capturing Princess Zara, but Jake had advantages too. He knew these asteroid fields better than any alien invader, and he understood human military tactics that would be completely foreign to the methodical Vorthan mind. As the enemy ship moved closer, scanning the rocks for his energy signature, Jake began to formulate a desperate plan. He shut down all non-essential systems and let his ship drift like a dead rock among the asteroids. When the Vorthan scanner beam passed over them, Jake held his breath and hoped their reduced energy output would not be detected. The beam moved on, but the enemy ship continued its search pattern, moving deeper into the asteroid field. Jake waited until the Vorthan ship was surrounded by large rocks, then fired up his engines and attacked from an unexpected angle. His plasma cannons raked across the enemy hull, causing explosions and system failures. But the Vorthans recovered quickly and returned fire with weapons far more powerful than anything on Jake's ship. The next few minutes were the most terrifying of Jake's life. He flew his ship through narrow gaps between asteroids, using the rocky debris as cover while the Vorthan weapons blasted chunks of stone into glowing vapor. His ship shook with each near miss, and warning alarms filled the cockpit with urgent sounds. Zara watched from the medical bay, her markings pulsing with fear and admiration as she witnessed Jake's incredible flying skills. No Catherian would have attempted such dangerous maneuvers, but this human warrior seemed to thrive on the impossible. He was fighting a superior enemy with inferior weapons and somehow managing to stay alive. Through pure skill and determination, the battle ended. When Jake managed to lure the Vorthan ship into a cluster of unstable asteroids, he fired his remaining missiles at the rocks above the enemy vessel, bringing down an avalanche of stone that crushed the alien ship's hull and destroyed its engines. The Vorthan scout exploded in a brilliant flash of light, but Jake's victory came at a cost. His own ship was badly damaged, with life support failing and engines barely functional. The destruction of the Vorthan scout ship sent ripples of alarm throughout their fleet. Commander Thrax, a massive warrior with scarred black armor and glowing red eyes, received the news in his command center aboard the flagship destroyer. His clawed hands crushed the metal rail he was gripping as rage filled his mind. One of his best scout pilots had been killed by primitive humans, and Princess Zara remained free. Thrax had been hunting the Catherian princes for months, ever since the conquest of her homeworld. The High Command had promised him promotion to Fleet Admiral if he could capture her alive and extract the genetic codes that would lead them to the surviving Catherians. But every lead had turned cold, every trap had been avoided, and now she was hiding somewhere in human space under the protection of these annoying creatures. He immediately dispatched 3 hunter-killer groups to search every star system in the region. Each group contained 5 warships armed with the latest Vorthan weapons technology. They would blast apart every asteroid, scan every planet, and interrogate every human they found until Princess Zara was located. The deaths of a few thousand humans meant nothing if it accomplished his mission. Meanwhile, Jake struggled to keep his damaged ship functional as they drifted through space. The life support systems were failing, the engines could barely maintain power, and several hull breaches were sealed only by emergency patches. Worse, his food supplies were running dangerously low and his medical bay was damaged beyond repair. They needed help, but Jake knew that calling for official assistance would mean revealing Zara's presence to Earth Defense Command. After much internal debate, Jake decided to contact his old friend Lieutenant Lisa Parker at Research Station New Olympia. Lisa was stationed at a remote scientific outpost that studied ancient alien ruins, far from the main shipping lanes and military patrols. If anyone would help him without asking too many questions, it would be her. They had served together on his first assignment and had saved each other's lives more than once during pirate attacks. The communication took several hours to reach New Olympia due to the distance involved. When Lisa's face appeared on the screen, her expression quickly changed from joy at seeing her old friend to shock at the sight of Princess Zara standing beside him. Jake explained the situation as quickly as possible, emphasizing that Zara was a refugee whose people had been victims of genocide, not an enemy spy or invasion force. Lisa was quiet for a long moment as she processed what Jake had told her. She had always known him to be a man of honor who would never endanger Earth without good reason. If he said this alien princess needed help, then she believed him. Besides, the scientific opportunity to study an advanced alien civilization was too valuable to pass up. New Olympia was a small facility built into a large asteroid, housing only 30 researchers and support staff. Dr. Adam Bell, the chief scientist, was a brilliant man in his 50s who had spent his entire career studying alien artifacts and technologies. When Lisa brought Jake and Zara to his laboratory, his eyes lit up with excitement at the sight of the bioluminescent patterns covering Zara's skin. Dr. Bell had never seen anything like Catherian genetic encoding before. Using advanced scanners, he discovered that the glowing markings contained incredible amounts of information stored in living DNA structures. There were star charts showing the locations of hundreds of worlds, scientific formulas that could advance human technology by centuries, and historical records of civilizations that had existed for millions of years. But the most amazing discovery came when Dr. Bell analyzed the deeper layers of genetic code. Hidden within Zara's DNA were the blueprints for advanced weapons and defensive systems that the Catherians had developed in secret during their final desperate months. There were designs for energy shields that could protect entire cities, plasma weapons that could destroy asteroids, and most incredibly, faster-than-light communication systems that worked instantly across any distance. The problem was that extracting this information safely would require a dangerous procedure that might kill Zara in the process. The genetic encoding was integrated so deeply into her biology that removing it could cause her entire nervous system to shut down. Dr. Bell estimated only a 60% chance that she would survive the extraction process. Zara faced an impossible choice. The information locked in her genes could give humanity the tools to fight back against the Vorthons and protect other peaceful civilizations from being destroyed. But accessing it meant risking her own life, and if she died, the location of Kairos Prime would die with her. Her people's last refuge would remain safe, but they would also remain helpless against their enemies. Jake argued passionately against the procedure. He had not saved Zara's life just to watch her die on an operating table. There had to be another way to get the information without putting her at such risk. But as they debated the options, time was running out. The Vorthon hunter groups were getting closer, and it would only be a matter of days before they discovered New Olympia. The decision was made for them when long-range sensors detected the approach of a massive Vorthon fleet. Commander Thrax himself was leading 12 warships directly toward their location, somehow having tracked them despite all their precautions. The research station's defenses were no match for such a force, and there was nowhere left to run. Dr. Bell worked frantically to modify his extraction equipment while Jake and Lisa prepared the station's few weapons for battle. Zara made the painful choice to undergo the procedure, not for her own people but to give these brave humans a chance to survive what was coming. She had watched Jake risk everything to save her, and now it was her turn to make the sacrifice. The extraction process was agonizing. Zara screamed as the genetic information was slowly pulled from her living tissue, her bioluminescent patterns flickering wildly before going dark. But she survived, though barely, and Dr. Bell successfully obtained the shield technology blueprints. Just as the Vorthon fleet dropped out of hyperspace, Jake looked at the readings showing 12 massive warships surrounding their tiny research station. They had new defensive technology, but no time to properly test or implement it. In a few hours, they would face the full might of the Vorthon war machine with nothing but courage, determination, and the hope that human ingenuity could overcome. Superior firepower. As Jake prepared for what might be his final battle, he looked at Zara lying unconscious in the medical bay. Her sacrifice had given them a fighting chance, but now it was up to him to make sure her pain had not been in vain. The fate of two civilizations rested on the upcoming battle, and Jake Morrison had never felt the weight of responsibility more heavily than he did at that moment. The Battle of New Olympia began at dawn when Commander Thrax's fleet opened fire on the research station. Massive energy beams lanced through space, striking the asteroid's surface and sending chunks of rock flying in all directions. But instead of punching through the station's hull as expected, the weapons struck an invisible barrier that shimmered blue-white in the darkness. Dr. Bell's hasty installation of the Catherian shield technology was working. The energy screens absorbed the incoming fire and redirected it harmlessly into space. For the first time in the battle, the humans had a defensive advantage over their enemies. But Jake knew the shields would not hold forever against sustained bombardment from 12 warships. Lisa coordinated the station's meager defenses while Jake prepared for a desperate counterattack. They had managed to retrofit his damaged patrol ship and 2 research vessels with basic shield generators, creating a tiny fleet that looked pathetic compared to the Vorthon armada. But Jake had learned something important during his earlier fight with the scout ship. The Vorthons were methodical fighters who relied on overwhelming firepower and predictable tactics. They did not expect enemies to behave irrationally or take insane risks. Jake's plan was built entirely on doing the unexpected. While the Vorthon ships maintained their formation and pounded the station's shields, he launched his 3-ship attack force on an approach vector that should have been suicide. Instead of attacking the flagship directly, he targeted the smaller escort vessels, using hit-and-run tactics that confused the enemy commanders. The first Vorthon ship to fall was a destroyer that Jake caught separated from the main group. He flew his patrol craft directly at the enemy vessel, firing all weapons at point-blank range before spinning away through a gap in their return fire. The destroyer's shields collapsed under the concentrated assault, and Lisa's follow-up attack with mining charges finished the job. The massive ship exploded in a brilliant fireball that lit up the asteroid field. Commander, Thrax watched the destruction of his destroyer with growing fury. These humans were fighting like mad creatures, taking risks that no sane military officer would consider. His own tactical training emphasized careful planning and overwhelming force, but the enemy was using chaos and unpredictability as weapons. When Jake's tiny fleet scattered in 3 different directions, Thrax found himself unsure which target to prioritize. The confusion gave Jake the opening he needed. While the Vorthan ships tried to track multiple targets, he managed to approach Thrax's flagship using the wreckage of the destroyed destroyer as cover. His patrol craft was badly damaged and running on emergency power, but he had one desperate gambit left to try. Jake had captured a Vorthan fighter during his escape from the asteroid field days earlier. The small ship was equipped with enemy identification codes that might allow him to get close to the flagship before being detected. It was an insane risk, but with the station's shields beginning to weaken under constant bombardment, he was running out of options. The stolen fighter, handled differently from human ships, but Jake's piloting skills adapted quickly to the alien controls. He flew the captured vessel directly toward Thrax's flagship, broadcasting Vorthan military codes and claiming to be a returning scout. The deception worked long enough to get him past the outer defense screen and into the flagship's landing. Once inside the enemy ship, Jake found himself surrounded by Vorthan warriors in black armor. They were larger and stronger than humans, with clawed hands and glowing red eyes that spoke of generations bred for war. But they were also overconfident, assuming that no human would be crazy enough to board their flagship alone. Jake used their surprise to his advantage, fighting his way through the corridors with captured Vorthan weapons. Meanwhile, Zara had awakened in the medical bay just as the battle reached its peak. Though weakened by the genetic extraction procedure, she could hear the sounds of weapons fire and explosions echoing through the station's hull. Her bioluminescent markings were dim now, most of the encoded information having been transferred to human computers, but she still retained her knowledge of Vorthan technology and tactics. Dragging herself to the command center, Zara helped Lisa coordinate the station's defenses by identifying weak points in the enemy ship's design. The Vorthans had built their vessels for maximum firepower, but this made them vulnerable to precise strikes on their power distribution systems. Using this knowledge, Lisa was able to guide the remaining human ships to target specific areas. That would cause cascade failures in the enemy vessels. The tide of battle began to turn as 2 more Vorthan ships suffered critical system failures and were forced to withdraw from the fight. But the real decisive moment came when Jake finally reached the flagship's command deck and confronted Commander Thrax face to face. The Vorthan commander was a terrifying sight, standing nearly 3 meters tall with scarred black armor and weapons that glowed with deadly energy. His red eyes blazed with hatred as he saw the human warrior who had caused him so much trouble. Thrax had expected to find Princess Zara cowering in some hidden corner, not to face a single human soldier in personal combat. The fight between Jake and Thrax was brutal and desperate. The Vorthan commander had superior strength and advanced weapons, but Jake fought with the fury of someone defending innocent lives. He used every dirty trick and unconventional tactic he had learned in 8 years of military service, turning the command deck into a chaotic battlefield of sparking electronics and shattered metal. Jake's human unpredictability proved decisive in the end. When Thrax expected him to retreat, Jake attacked. When the Vorthan commander prepared for a frontal assault, Jake struck from an impossible angle. The final blow came when Jake used the flagship's own systems against its commander, overloading a power conduit that electrocuted Thrax through his metal armor. As the Vorthan commander lay dying, he revealed information that chilled Jake to the bone. The ships attacking New Olympia were only a small advance force. A massive Vorthan armada containing hundreds of warships was already moving toward Earth, planning to destroy humanity's homeworld in revenge for their interference. Even if Jake won this battle, it would only delay the inevitable. With Thrax dead and their flagship captured, the remaining Vorthan ships retreated into hyperspace. The Battle of New Olympia was over, but the war was just beginning. Jake returned to the research station to find Zara recovering and Dr. Bell analyzing the captured enemy technology. They had won an impossible victory, but at a terrible cost. Zara looked at Jake with new understanding as he told her about the approaching armada. She had sacrificed her genetic heritage to give humanity defensive technology, but it would not be enough to stop hundreds of enemy warships. There was only one weapon powerful enough to destroy such a massive fleet, but using it would require an even greater sacrifice than either of them had imagined. Zara led Jake through the captured data from Thrax's flagship to show him the location of the ancient weapon hidden in the Crimson Nebula. The star charts revealed a massive construct built by her ancestors millions of years ago, designed as a last resort against threats that could destroy entire civilizations. The weapon had the power to eliminate the approaching Vorthan armada, but activating it required a living Cytherian to link their life force directly to the ancient systems. Jake stared at the holographic display showing the nebula's swirling gases and the dark object hidden at its center. The weapon looked like a giant crystal flower with petals that stretched for hundreds of kilometers. According to the data, it had been used only once before, when the Cytherians faced extinction from a plague of machine intelligences that consumed entire star systems. The weapon had saved their civilization then, but at the cost of thousands of lives. Dr. Bell studied the technical specifications with growing excitement and horror. The ancient construct was powered by what the Cytherians called life energy, the same force that created the bioluminescent patterns on Zara's skin. To fire the weapon, a member of her species had to merge their consciousness with the targeting system, using their own life force as ammunition. The process was always fatal, designed as an ultimate sacrifice to save others. Zara accepted this fate with calm resignation. She had already lost everything that mattered to her except the hope that her people might survive on their hidden world. If her death could destroy the Vorthan armada and protect both humans and Cytherians from future attacks, then it would be a worthy end to her story. But Jake refused to accept this solution. He had not fought so hard to save her life just to watch her throw it away now. There had to be another option, some way to activate the weapon without killing her in the process. Jake studied the technical data for hours, looking for any alternative that Dr. Bell might have missed. His military training had taught him that there was always another way if you were willing to think creatively enough. The breakthrough came when Jake realized that the weapon's targeting system was designed for Cytherian neural patterns, but the power source requirements were based on life energy itself. Humans had different brain structures than Cytherians, but they possessed the same fundamental life force. If he could link his mind to Zara's during the activation process, they might be able to share the energy burden between them. Dr. Bell warned that the procedure was completely untested and could kill them both. Human and Cytherian nervous systems were similar but not identical, and forcing them to merge could cause catastrophic feedback loops that would destroy both minds. Even if they survived the neural bonding, the energy drain from firing the weapon might still be too much for two people to handle. But the Vorthan armada, only days away from Earth. They had no choice but to try. Jake and Zara spent their remaining time preparing for the journey to the Crimson Nebula while Dr. Bell worked frantically to modify his genetic extraction equipment for the neural bonding process. Lisa coordinated with Earth Defense Command to evacuate as many civilians as possible from the core worlds. Though there was nowhere to run if the plan failed, the flight to the nebula took 18 hours in Jake's repaired patrol ship. During the journey, he and Zara talked about their hopes and fears for the future. She told him about the crystal gardens of her homeworld, where music grew like flowers and art lived and breathed with its own consciousness. He described Earth's blue oceans and the feeling of wind through green forests, things she would never see if their plan failed. As they talked, Jake realized that his feelings for Zara had grown far beyond simple friendship or military duty. Despite the differences between their species, he had come to love her courage, her wisdom, and her willingness to sacrifice everything for others. She had shown him that there were things in the universe worth dying for, principles that mattered. More than personal survival, Zara felt the same connection to this strange, human warrior who had risked everything to save a stranger. His concept of individual heroism had seemed alien to her at first, but now she understood that love itself was a form of heroism. Jake had chosen to love her knowing that their time together would be brief, that their differences made any future together impossible. Yet he loved her anyway, because that was what humans did when they cared about someone. The ancient weapon loomed before them as they entered the nebula, its crystal petals dark and lifeless after millions of years of dormancy. Jake docked their ship with the construct's central hub, and they made their way through corridors, filled with strange symbols and incomprehensible technology. The air tasted of ozone and distant starlight. Charged with energies that made their skin tingle. At the weapon's heart was a chamber filled with flowing liquid light, where the targeting system waited for activation. Dr. Bell's modified equipment had been installed hastily, but it would have to be enough. Jake and Zara stood together before the neural interface, knowing that the next few minutes would determine the fate of billions of lives across the galaxy. The bonding process was unlike anything either of them had ever experienced. As their minds touched and merged, Jake felt Zara's memories flowing through his consciousness like a river of silver light. He saw her childhood in the crystal palaces, felt her grief at watching her world die, experienced her fear and loneliness during the long flight through space. In return, she felt his determination to protect the innocent, his love for the simple beauties of Earth, and his absolute refusal to abandon those who needed help. Their merged consciousness reached out to touch the ancient weapon systems, feeling the vast power contained within its crystalline structure. The targeting information flowed through their joined minds as they located the Vorthan Armada approaching Earth. Hundreds of warships hung in space like a plague of metal locusts, ready to rain death on defenseless worlds. Together, Jake and Zara fired the weapon. Energy beyond imagination flowed through their bodies and minds, burning like liquid fire through their nervous systems. The crystal petals of the ancient construct blazed with light that could be seen from distant star systems as power older than human civilization awakened from its million-year sleep. The beam that emerged from the weapon traveled faster than light itself, reaching across space to find the Vorthan fleet. When it struck, the enemy ship simply ceased to exist, unmade at the molecular level by forces that reduced matter to its component atoms. In seconds, the threat that could have destroyed Earth was gone forever. Jake and Zara collapsed together in the weapon's chamber, their minds still linked by the neural bonding process. Against all odds, they had both survived, though the experience had changed them in ways they were only beginning to understand. They could feel each other's emotions across any distance, share thoughts without speaking, and sense each other's presence even when separated by space and time. Their success led to a new era of cooperation between humans and Cytherians. Earth's government formally recognized Princess Zara as a diplomatic representative, and she helped establish peaceful contact with her people's hidden refuge. The two species began sharing technology and knowledge, with humans providing military protection while Cytherians offered advanced science and cultural wisdom. Jake was promoted to captain and given command of the first joint human-Cytherian exploration vessel. Zara served as his diplomatic advisor and partner in every sense of the word. Their relationship became a symbol of what was possible when different species worked together instead of fighting each other. Years later, as they explored the far reaches of the galaxy together, other alien civilizations took notice of the human-Cytherian alliance. Some were hostile, viewing any cooperation as a threat to their own power. But others were curious about these strange humans who fought not for conquest but to protect the innocent. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders, and Jake and Zara would spend their lives discovering what lay beyond the next star.